picture the absolute classic 20th century business milestone, you know?
Mm-hmm.
You finally make it, you walk into a corner office, you sit down at this massive mahogany desk.
Oh, the whole power trip.
Right. You grab a fancy pen and you just sign a 10-year commercial lease.
Yeah.
You dump this massive portion of your operating budget into this one fixed address, build out all the cubicles, stick your logo on the glass.
And then you just cross your fingers.
Exactly. You basically cross your fingers that everything about your company, like your headcount, your workflow, your technology, just stays permanently unchanged for the next decade.
Which, I mean, is an incredibly fragile way to run an organization when you really think about it.
Oh, totally.
That traditional model assumes this level of macroeconomic and internal predictability that simply does not exist anymore.
No, it really doesn't. And if you manage a team or oversee a budget right now, you know that friction firsthand. And that tension is the entire focus of our deep dives today. We are unpacking a really fascinating analysis from Brandnook, which is an Indianapolis-based workspace provider. The piece is titled Evolution of the Indianapolis Office: Stability Meets Flexibility.
It's a great read.
It really is. Our goal today is to extract the absolute best nuggets from this piece and figure out the mechanics of how successful businesses are just tearing up that old playbook. They aren't treating real estate as this static, heavy asset anymore.
Right. Space is now an operational tool.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this, because treating space as a tool fundamentally rewrites a company's cost structure, right?
Oh, 100%. It rewrites the cost structure and it directly impacts day-to-day human performance. But to understand how businesses are, wielding that tool, we first have to look at the immediate shock to the commercial real estate system.
Yeah, let's start with the sheer scale of that shock, because there's a 2024 Commercial Cafe report in this data that puts the average office vacancy rate in Indianapolis at 22.29%.
Which is massive.
It is. Nearly a quarter of the commercial space in the city is just sitting there completely empty. I look at a massive number like that, and I kind of have to play devil's advocate here.
Go for it.
With a 22% vacancy rate, isn't the physical office just dying? I mean, committing to a multi-year lease for a fast-growing startup, it feels like buying a tuxedo for a toddler.
A tuxedo for a toddler. I love that.
Right. Because they are guaranteed to outgrow the suit before the big event even happens.
That is a perfect analogy for the old, rigid model of commercial real estate. But what's fascinating here is a 22% vacancy rate isn't a symptom of the death of the office.
Okay, then what is it?
It's a symptom of a massive flight to quality. The demand for physical space hasn't vanished at all. It has just become aggressively selective.
Interesting.
Yeah, businesses are looking at those empty, beige, drop-ceiling rooms and actively refusing to pay for environments that don't generate a tangible return on their investment.
Okay, I see the logic there. It's not that companies don't want physical space, it's that they won't pay for useless space.
Like, if I'm renting a massive room just so my employees can commute 45 minutes to sit in silence with noise-canceling headphones while they take Zoom calls.
You're basically setting payroll on fire.
Exactly. They can do that from their living room.
And that is the core realization shifting the market. The office used to be justified by default. It was just a line item you paid because, well, you were a business.
Right.
Now, the office has to earn its keep by facilitating the things you cannot do effectively at a kitchen table. We're talking about dynamic whiteboarding, spontaneous problem solving, secure, specialized focus, and, actual human connection.
Yeah.
If a building isn't amenity-driven and architecturally designed for those specific functions, executives are just walking away from the lease.
So, if the rigid toddler tuxedo lease is out and an empty room with Wi-Fi isn't enough to justify a commute, companies have to find a bridge.
Right.
Which points directly to the strategic value of co-working. And we need to strip away the decade-old stereotypes here.
Yeah. We are not talking about tech startups looking for free kombucha and a ping pong table.
No, not at all.
We need to look at the hard financial and cognitive mathematics of this shift.
Well, the most immediate mathematical advantage for a business is the transition from a capital expense to an operating expense, moving from CapEx to OpEx.
Let's actually explain the mechanics of that, because it is a fundamental shift in how a business manages its survival runway.
Yeah, it's huge.
If I go out and sign a traditional lease for an empty commercial space, I am staring down this massive capital expense before a single employee even walks through the door. I mean, I have to hire contractors for tenant improvements, physically move HVAC zones.
Run enterprise-level fiber optic cable.
Exactly. Install security systems and buy 50 of those really expensive ergonomic chairs. That is a massive, terrifying check to write up front.
And that precious capital is now permanently trapped in the physical infrastructure of that specific room. Coworking converts all of that heavy upfront capital exposure into a predictable, scalable operating expense. You are paying a monthly premium per desk, certainly, but you are keeping that $50,000 or $100,000 in your bank account.
Which is lifeblood for a growing business.
Exactly. You preserve your liquidity. You can deploy that saved capital into hiring a lead developer, launching an ad campaign, or extending your actual business runway by 6 months. You are essentially renting agility.
I love that phrase, renting agility. And beyond the balance sheet, there's a secondary layer to this that is equally critical, which is the cognitive reality of these spaces.
Oh, this is the best part.
Yeah, the data has a 2024 Gallup Workplace report that highlights that employees with access to well-designed, low-distraction spaces report meaningfully higher engagement and productivity.
Which heavily challenges the widespread assumption that informal remote work is always the ultimate productivity hack for every employee.
I'd argue it comes down to the friction of your environment. Think about informal remote work, like sitting on your couch or at your dining room table, as the junk food of productivity.
Junk food. Okay, explain that.
Well, in the short term, it feels incredibly convenient. You skip the traffic, you wear sweatpants, it tastes great, but it lacks nutritional structure.
Ah, I see.
When you work where you live, the environmental boundaries erode. You have the dog barking, the visual clutter of laundry that needs to be folded, the delivery driver knocking on the door.
Right.
And every single time your brain switches tasks to process those interruptions, it degrades your deep work capacity.
You are tapping right into environmental psychology there. The human brain relies heavily on spatial cues to trigger specific cognitive states.
Yeah.
When you walk into a premium co-working space that has been architecturally designed for focus with acoustic dampening, dedicated quiet zones, and structured meeting rooms, you are outsourcing the discipline of focus to the building itself.
Oh, wow. Outsourcing discipline. That makes so much sense.
Right. Your brain registers the professional environment and automatically shifts into an active gear without you having to burn immense willpower trying to ignore the laundry.
And employers are starting to quantify that retained energy.
Yeah.
I mean, if your creative professionals or your software engineers are losing 2 hours of deep, unbroken focus a day to environmental friction at home, that is a massive hidden tax on your payroll.
Absolutely.
Which explains why the data project's flexible workspaces will make up to 30% of total office inventory by 2030.
We do have to look at the inverse of this trend, though.
Okay, why?
Because a purely flexible model isn't a permanent, flawless utopia for every stage of a business life cycle.
Oh, let me push back on that idea. If co-working preserves my capital runway by avoiding those massive upfront CapEx costs, and it provides this perfectly optimized psychological environment that boosts my team's output,
Yeah.
why would I ever leave? It seems like madness to ever go back to the mahogany desk and sign a traditional lease. Why wouldn't every single company just stay on a month-to-month agreement forever?
Because flexibility has a compound interest rate. At a certain point in a company's growth, the cost of remaining perfectly agile becomes wildly inefficient.
Okay, let's put some hard numbers to that inefficiency. Because the analysis we're looking at provides a very specific mathematical threshold. It says the per-seat economics of a traditional lease usually shift favorably somewhere between 15 and 25 people.
Yes, that is the critical tipping point where a company's entire real estate strategy has to pivot.
So what mechanically breaks at, say, 20 employees to cause that pivot?
It really comes down to the premium you pay for flexibility versus the amortized cost of a fixed asset. Look, if you have 5 employees, paying a $400 premium per person for a co-working membership is incredibly cheap insurance.
Right.
It protects you from the risk of signing a 5-year lease when you don't know if your company will even exist in 2 years.
That makes sense.
But let's say your company scales and you hit 20 employees. You are now paying a massive financial markup every single month for the privilege of leaving whenever you want.
Oh, wow. Yeah, doing the math on that, over a year, that premium alone could be close to $100,000 in extra operational costs.
Exactly.
At that scale, taking that financial hit just to maintain an escape hatch makes no sense. You could have easily bought your own furniture and set up your own IT infrastructure with the capital you were losing to the co-working markup.
And beyond the raw math, there is an operational maturity that happens around 20 employees.
Yeah.
Your volatility stabilizes.
Also.
Well, think about it. If a 5-person company hires 2 people, their spatial needs jump by 40%. That requires a completely new room.
Right.
But if a 25-person company hires 2 people, they barely notice the difference in square footage.
Yeah.
Your headcount growth becomes predictable enough that committing to a dedicated footprint is no longer a blind gamble. It becomes a calculated infrastructure play.
I imagine the need for total environmental control becomes non-negotiable at that scale, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if you are handling highly sensitive financial data, or you need heavy, specialized engineering equipment, you cannot operate out of a shared communal facility. You need absolute dominion over your server racks, your security protocols, and frankly, your client's first visual impression when they walk off the elevator.
Which is precisely why traditional leasing remains the bedrock of mature business operations. It provides clarity, cost control at scale, and total brand immersion that a shared space simply cannot offer.
Okay, so we have established these 2 universal forces. We have the agile, operating expense-driven engine of co-working for teams under 15,
Right.
and the stable, cost-controlled anchor of traditional leases for teams over 25.
Yeah.
But I want to introduce a massive variable into this equation, geography.
Yes. The wild card.
Because this data is specifically analyzing Indianapolis, and the local economics of the Midwest completely warped this decision-making matrix.
The regional pricing disparity changes the psychological risk profile for a business owner entirely.
And I really want to highlight how dramatic this is. The average office rent in Indianapolis is $23.79 per square foot.
Which is remarkably low.
Yeah, the national average is almost $10 higher, sitting at $32.79. But look at the coastal hubs. Manhattan is sitting around $68 per square foot. San Francisco is hovering at $69 per square foot.
The financial barrier to entry there is operating in a different stratosphere.
Right. This creates a fascinating trap for leadership. In San Francisco, a 5-person startup literally cannot afford a commercial lease. $100,000 a year in rent just isn't an option.
No.
Co-working is forced upon them by the sheer weight of the market. But in Indianapolis, because the rent is a fraction of the cost, that same 5-person startup actually has the capital. They technically can afford to sign a small traditional lease.
But just because you have the capital in your account doesn't mean you should spend it on a wall.
Wait, say more about that. That's the pivotal realization here, isn't it?
It is. In an affordable market, the currency you are trading isn't really the rent money, it's your agility. The choice isn't about cost. It is entirely about commitment.
Wow.
It is a critical paradigm shift. When commercial rent is cheap, the temptation is to lock down a private space just because it feels like a traditional validating business milestone. You want your name on the door.
Right.
But if you lock a dynamic 5-person team into a static 5-year footprint just because the monthly rent was low, you're completely sacrificing your ability to adapt to the market.
You are buying the toddler tuxedo simply because it was on sale.
Yes, exactly. The flexibility to contract when the market dips or to expand overnight when you land a massive account is fundamentally more valuable than the real estate itself, even when that real estate is cheap.
Okay, so if pure co-working gets financially inefficient at scale and pure traditional leasing is too rigid and risky for dynamic teams, how do businesses actually operationalize a solution?
That's the golden question.
How do you actually build a real estate strategy around this tension?
The most sophisticated organizations are abandoning the either-or mentality completely. They are adopting a hybrid strategy, often referred to as a hub-and-spoke model.
I want to break down exactly how a company deploys that. Imagine a 50-person logistics firm. They use a traditional long-term lease to establish their core headquarters, the hub.
Right.
That is where the executive suite sits, where the secure servers live, and where they bring in major investors. It provides absolute stability.
But then they utilize co-working for the spokes. Let's say that logistics firm wins a massive seasonal contract and suddenly needs to bring on 15 data entry contractors for 6 months.
They don't go out and sign a second 5-year lease for another building just to house a 6-month surge.
Exactly. They spin up a dedicated block of desks at a premium co-working facility across town. The contractors have a professional, low-distraction environment with enterprise Wi-Fi on day 1.
Yeah.
And when the contract ends in 6 months, the company simply drops the desks and spins the capacity back down to 0. They injected perfect flexibility right at the edge of their business without destabilizing their core footprint.
That is incredibly smart. There is also a micro-level application of this that the Brandnook data highlights, which is the virtual office.
Oh yeah, virtual offices are huge right now.
This is for the business that realizes It doesn't actually need daily physical occupancy,
Yeah.
but absolutely requires the credentialing of a physical presence.
It solves the credibility gap without the physical overhead.
Right. Let's say you are a high-level consultant operating primarily from your home office, or you are a Chicago-based tech firm that wants to open an Indianapolis market. You don't need a physical desk every Tuesday at 9 a.m.,
No.
but you cannot list a residential apartment address on a corporate vendor application. A virtual office gives you the professional business address, mail handling, and on-demand access to a boardroom when you need to fly in and close a deal. You gain the institutional infrastructure at a fraction of the cost.
It's all about paying exclusively for the utility you actually consume. And workspace providers like Brandnook are tailoring their models to capture exactly this. They are offering private office suites and co-working memberships with zero long-term obligations.
They even offer a 3-day free trial, which, based on what we've discussed about environmental psychology, is crucial.
You really have to test the space.
Yeah, you shouldn't just look at glossy photos of a space. You need to physically test the cognitive environment. Put your developers in the room for 3 days and see if the acoustic design and the spatial layout actually boost their output before you commit your budget.
And for the businesses that have crossed that 15 to 25 person threshold, the ones ready to establish their stable hub, Brandnook operates a partnership with Allies Commercial Realty.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, because navigating the nuances of tenant improvement allowances, lease terms, and spatial planning requires localized market expertise so you don't over-leverage your growth.
It fundamentally changes how you view a floor plan. Okay, let's pull all of this together. We started by dismantling the myth of the default lease. An empty room isn't an asset. It's a massive liability if it doesn't actively drive human performance.
Right. And we unpack the mechanics of coworking, demonstrating how shifting from heavy capital expenditures to agile operating expenses preserves a company's runway, while simultaneously providing the structured environment necessary for deep work.
We did the math on the 15 to 25 person tipping point, proving why successful companies eventually cycle back to traditional leases to control their costs at scale.
Yep.
And we looked at how an affordable market like Indianapolis actually forces businesses to make a choice about their level of commitment, rather than just surviving the raw cost. It all culminates in that dynamic hub-and-spoke hybrid model.
It's an incredibly precise, deliberate way to build a company's physical footprint.
So, to you listening right now, if you are managing a team, you need to ruthlessly audit your environment. Are you an 8-person team burning capital on a rigid 10-year commitment when you only have 6 months of true market visibility?
Yeah, that's a dangerous spot to be in.
Or are you a stable 30-person operation hemorrhaging money on co-working premiums when you should be locking down your own infrastructure?
As you evaluate how your organization consumes space, I want you to consider this final thought. We have clearly established that the physical office is an operational tool, something designed to constantly expand, contract, and adapt to project cycles.
Right.
But if your physical walls are designed to be transient, if your team is distributed across shifting hybrid hubs and flexible spokes, how do you foster a permanent, cohesive company culture?
Wow.
When the physical environment is temporary, what becomes the permanent anchor for your people?
That is the defining challenge for the next decade of leadership. Because whether you are signing that massive mahogany desk lease or spinning up a dynamic, flexible trial, the square footage is ultimately only as valuable as the work happening inside it.